you for coming. My name is Tom Little. I am the co-chair of the Governor's Marijuana Advisory Commission. We're doing, this is the fourth in a series of listening events or public hearings around the state. The purpose of this is to hear from you, not to give a long speech or lecture about what we've been up to. I will say that there's a handout available that kind of frames the issue of what the commission is all about, and the questions that the commission has been asked to address. And it says a little bit about the questions that we haven't been asked to address. Ultimately, we're being asked to give advice and recommendations about what Vermont should do if the decision makers decided to move Vermont into a regulated, licensed retail sales cannabis market. Our recommendation, our mission is not to recommend that Vermont do that or not do that, but to say what would be the best way for Vermont to do that if the legislature and the governor went ahead and did that. In other words, what would be the best model in Vermont for retail sales? What's the Vermont way of doing it? Good evening.
Hello.
Hello.
Took us a little while to find the place.
It was an easy to find.
Hi, Jim.
And on the website for the commission, which is a link in the handout, there are 3 draft reports from the 3 subcommittees of the commission. The one on roadway safety, education and prevention, and taxation and regulation. And those subcommittees have done a lot of work over the last 15 months. And I think whether you agree or disagree with some or all of what is in their draft reports, they put a lot of effort into it, and they've gone into a fair amount of detail. And those are the recommendations that the commission is going to be reviewing when it makes its final report later this month. Should just add maybe a little bit about my background. I'm a lawyer. Grew up in Bennington. Came back after law school. I've been active in my community. I served in the state legislature in the House from Shelburne from 92 to 2002. And I'm also chair of the District 4 Environmental Commission that does all the Act 250 contested cases in Chittenden County. And the other co-chair, Jake Perkinson, we decided he did St. Johnsbury on Monday night, and I said I'll do Bennington because I like coming down to Bennington.
Thank you.
I was telling someone earlier, I think earlier, I had my brother-in-law was co-chairing a statewide nonprofit effort about 15 years ago. He grew up in New York State, and I said, you ought to have some of these committee meetings in the southern part of the state, so you get moving around the state. He said, that's a good idea. I think we could go to Randolph. And I said, no, we can't go to Randolph. And he said, how about Rutland? I said, no, if you really want to show people of the state that you care about every part of the state, go down around somewhere close to Route 9. And he said, that's a long way to go. I said, that's the point. Because they have to come do it the other way, heading up north. So what we're going to do is, when we get to the testimony in a few minutes, we're going to go through the sign-in sheet. Just because you signed in doesn't mean you have to testify. It's okay to say, no thanks, I don't wish to speak right now. We're going to allocate between 2 and 3 minutes per person so we make sure everybody gets heard. And if we have time left over at the end, we can talk about maybe a more of a roundtable discussion. But the time slips away pretty quickly. Any questions about the process? And Senator Sears would like to share his perspective as another member of the commission.
Thank you, Tom. And Tom and I worked together as chairs of the Senate and House Judiciary Committee for several years, and we always had a good working relationship, although they were House members. That made it a little different. I wanted to give a brief, I'm one of the 2 Senate members of the commission, and it's important to have a brief history here of what happened and why we have a commission and what we did. 2 years ago, the legislature passed, the Senate passed a tax and regulated bill. It went over to the House of Representatives. We felt we had done a good job and that it should have been passed by them. They refused to pass it. I will let House members speak for themselves. I won't characterize. But in private negotiations with the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, we decided that we would pass a legalization bill, and part of what the Senate would get out of that would be a commission that would get us as quickly as possible to a tax and regulated system. And working together with the House of Representatives, we were able to pass the legalization. However, the governor vetoed that bill. And when he vetoed it, he said, well, there's certain things that I want that need to be done. And one of them was he didn't want a commission. So Representative Grab, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, myself, and several other legislators began working together to try to fashion a bill that the governor would accept, which was the legalization bill that became effective. One of the things we insisted on was some form of commission so that at least we could have a path towards a tax and regulated system, which is something that I strongly believe in. It may not happen, but that's part of the legislative process. So the governor did the commission through executive order rather than part of the legislation that we passed. And so that's why we're here. I'm particularly pleased that Bennington was chosen as one of the 5 sites to have this listening tour. The Senate did a listening tour about 2 years ago, and we heard from people all over the state, and that's part of what led us to the bill that we passed. But again, that's part of the legislative process. We all work together, and hopefully we will get to a tax and regulated system. But we're waiting until December 12th, 15th for the commission's report. Then we'll submit a bill, or at least a number of us will submit some form of bill that is maybe partly based on the commission's report. I think certainly tax and regulate will be the major part of it. There are some areas of disagreement, but we're happy to talk about those, and I'm delighted to have Tom and the other members of the commission here. Thank them for coming down to Bennington. And I really appreciate doing it 6:30 at night. Usually people want to get down here at 10 in the morning so they can, and they say, oh my God. When we have a meeting in Montpelier, it's always at 9 a.m. And when they want to come down here, it's usually at 11 because, gee, it's a long way. But thank you all for being here, and Tom, thank you very much for sharing this.
Okay. And why don't we get started with the sign-in sheet. First up, Michael Stern, and after Michael, Adam Platt. And we have a sign-in sheet.
Yes. Hi, I'm Michael Stern. You want me to come up and...
No, we can pass the mic around.
Hi, I'm Michael Stern. I grew up in Manhattan, and so at the age of 14, I was exposed to cannabis. I went to boarding school in Williamstown, Massachusetts, where it was frowned upon, so most of my brain developed cannabis-free. I ended up with 2 graduate degrees with honors and was the guy who signed AT&T's documents stating it was Y2K ready. So I had top corporate experience. AT&T didn't screen for cannabis. I took care of my dad. He died on Pearl Harbor Day, 7 days and 7 months into his 100th year. 2 days from now, 3 years ago. I took care of him in Bennington for the last 2 years of his life with cannabis. 6 years ago, my orthopedist told me that I was the poster child of the guy who looks at his x-rays and says, "But doc, I've got a season pass." I ski. Last year, yesterday was my 1-year anniversary of slightly breaking my leg. 6 weeks later, I told my orthopedic surgeon, CBD doc, because he didn't see the fracture on the x-ray. And even though I broke it on day 10, I finished with 43 days. I'm just telling you that a lot of the stories that you hear about cannabis and its deleterious effects on people are highly exaggerated, at least in my case. So I want this commission to look seriously at what it's going to take to make cannabis normative instead of stigmatized, and what we're going to do to keep our people healthy. Are we going to keep them sick because it'll make people get rich quick, or are we going to keep them healthy? Right now, our stock market is trembling. It could go down and tank. It's happened before. People will no longer have their money, but they will also not have their health. I want to make Vermont wealthy by keeping people healthy, not get rich quick by keeping them sick. Because that's just sick, not healthy.
Hello. Okay. Hello. I'm Matt, and for purposes of
Can you speak up?
for the purposes of as many people speaking as possible, I will try to be succinct. I'm a farmer in Bennington. I grow both conventional crops, such as radishes and kale, as well as CBD-bearing cannabis, known as hemp, as well as the legally allowed increasing recreational cannabis as a Vermont resident, which we are entitled to grow. This bill would be influencing the permits that would apply to growing more of it. And the things that are concerned to farmers are how much do we have to pay for these permits? If it's a small farm, then less for a domestic farmer would be better. When large farms and large corporations come from outside the state, there should be a lot mitigating their influence, because Vermont is such a small market and it's so easy to flood. So there should be a lot of protections in place for the local farmer. We want people to have Vermont residents that are, of the appropriate age should have easy access through these markets and farmers, preferably directly from the farmers if they are responsible residents of the consenting age. And we should be able to have our cannabis evaluated and evaluated as, a certain quality and a certain grade. Is it organic? Is it not organic? The local farmers are concerned about, are there going to be domestic farms in Vermont that are given gigantic permits to do thousands of acres? Or is there going to be a maximum of maybe for a large industrial hemp farm, 50 acres, 100 acres? We can do a lot, but we can only take so much. With that being said, the locals of Vermont want to maybe treat this kind of like craft beer, only maybe a little less dangerous. So thank you for your time and support of your local farmers market, wherever it may be.
Thank you.
Ron Conroy?
I'm here
Crowley.
Great.
There. And Jim Salzgill.
Hi, my name is Dave Crowley. I live in Bennington. I believe that marijuana should be legalized in Vermont. I believe that we need to legislate, regulate, and educate. In reading the three papers that the commission has put forward, I just have a couple of small comments on the health impact assessment. Certainly seems to be heavily skewed towards underage smokers, but it buries the lead when it doesn't start with one of the most important statistics in the report, and that is that marijuana use by high school kids has been on the decline since 2003, with a statistical error jump in 2008. And the takeaway there is that marijuana use by underage kids is on the decline. When the state decides to educate these kids about marijuana, if the state is dishonest or not forthcoming in this education portion of the program, you will lose the very kids you're looking to convince that they defer this. The 20% target by 2020 will never go down. This state needs, I believe, a two-tier tax structure for the pricing of marijuana. One for out-of-state and one for in-state. Why? Since your taxation plan will justify the continued existence of what we like to call artisanal growers and you call the black market, why would any local person pay a 27% premium for marijuana they can get without it? Perpetuates the system of a black market, underground, quasi-legal. It's just it makes no sense. Embrace this culture. Let artisanal growers sell to local Vermonters, but local Vermonters only. Tourists have to go to a retail seller. In-state population can buy local, and they don't have to pay this 27% tax. If you have a Vermont driver's license, a Vermont ID, and you're over 21, there's no reason for you to have to pay this punitive tax. People of all ages recognize what a double standard looks like, and this can be. Legislate, regulate, educate, but please do it with honesty and compassion. Reconsider your position of scold in the room. Perhaps it's time to embrace the wishes of the clear majority of Vermonters who want legal marijuana. This is Vermont's chance to establish an equitable system that benefits the state while considering Vermonters.
Who's next on the list?
Who's next?
Jim?
Who's next?
That one can speak, okay. Representative Sullivan, would you like to have anything to say tonight?
The only thing I have to say is thank you for coming here. It's very important that you get to hear what everybody in the community has to say. And I appreciate that opportunity. I am one of the representatives who will be bringing the bill. I look forward to sharing that with the Senate and discussing that. So thank you.
Scott Stoller? Very convenient.
Thanks for coming down today. I used to own a hydroponics store right in town here. I'm also a 20-year grower of cannabis, legally or illegally. And I believe we should have a great market here. We do have a market. And it should be for small growers, small Vermont growers. Keep it artisanal, like others have already said. We do need a couple big grows also to make up for what the small growers can't do, but it should be mostly small growers from Vermont that know what they're doing already. That's all I got. Thank you.
Frank Nelson?
For the last. Okay.
Mary, would you?
No, I'll pass, but again,
Okay.
thank you.
Brian Levy?
Len?
Lent, sorry, Brian.
Just quickly, my name is Brian Lentz. I am a manager up at Daily Precast and with the commission here and the topic at hand. One of the things I would just like to say is that whatever happens with the legalization, whatever happens here, one of the things we need to have is an opportunity to be able to control the workplace and protect people in the workplace. So having opportunities to test people for drugs, things of that nature, if there is suspicion and or randomly, whatever comes up at hand at that point, we have to have some kind of control in the workplace as this evolves into more. So that's what I have to have.
Just out of curiosity, what is your workplace and why are controls needed? Have you done any research on doing your jobs the other way?
We have a number of jobs that we have, and we also fall under the federal laws for drivers, which we have to regulate by law. The other part of our operation is a precast operation, and we handle big pieces of precast that you've probably seen going up and down the road. So we have people dealing with cranes, we have people dealing with equipment, we have a lot of moving things that require people to be, full faculties. So things of that nature that we just have to be careful. We have to look at everything and say we need people that come in, they're not under the influence of anything, and we need to make sure that that's happening. So,
Absolutely fine.
Jim Carroll, did you want to say anything?
Right over here. The questions that I have with respect to sales in the state is how is it going to be done? Are there going to be retail locations as opposed to, private home growers, as this gentleman mentioned earlier, where the state will effectively have no control over the sales and the reporting of taxes, this 27% tax that's proposed, and the likelihood that private growers are going to pay it is frankly unlikely. So the question I have is, if there are going to be retail operations, where would they be? How would they be controlled?
Well, you should take a look at the draft recommendations from the Subcommittee on Taxation and Regulation, and that's pretty much laid out in there. One of the issues, we've worked with some representatives from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns who have keen interest in this from a number of different perspectives. And they want access to some of this revenue to help support local enforcement efforts and issues dealing with perhaps planning and zoning. Some states have a local opt-out option, so that if the town does nothing in those states, someone can obtain a license, assuming they meet regular zoning requirements. Other states have an opt-in, so that only the towns that take an affirmative vote to opt in to be a location for licensed sales can happen in their communities. And I don't think that issue has been, H 490, what was that, opt-in or opt-out, or did it address it?
490, 241 didn't allow for that. And, tax rate will be set by the legislature. 27% could be 10%, could be 15%. I don't know. I think, somebody started high. I wasn't there at the meeting where they decided 27, but I don't think that's the killer. The question really are, how will it be sold? Who will be able to sell it? How small could you create a co-op type system for small farmers to farm and then have sales in an outlet? I think those are a lot of questions that will be answered in the legislation, and you'll have the opportunity to answer.
Well, get a chance to work on it. Next pot. I don't know how Colorado or Massachusetts have done it. But currently, the cannabis store here in Bennington, if he, Bernie Barrier, said that if he wanted to sell pot, he couldn't get insurance, he couldn't get business insurance. They won't cover it because it's still a federal offense to sell pot. So has that been contemplated in Montpelier?
Yes. The banking system is a whole other bundle of issues. There's, and
The credit unions have said that
They would.
the credit union in Montpelier is doing the medical work, medical marijuana dispensary financing and bank accounts.
But insurance is a whole other kind of worms.
Yeah.
There's that federal issue was also a reason why the tax and regulation group decided against doing with cannabis what we do with alcohol. And alcohol, all of that, the sales sort of flow through the state out to the liquor outlets and licensed establishments. So there are state employees who, in a sense, are touching the product in some respects. And there have been some interest in seeing whether that made sense for cannabis, but their concerns was that state employees might be legally at risk under federal law if they were doing with cannabis what they
The state employees would be at what?
at risk legally if they were doing with cannabis what they were doing with alcohol, because the federal law is different for alcohol than it is for cannabis.
What would they be at risk for?
Well, if they were, it's illegal under federal law to possess and transfer
So
and sell
they, they could be arrested
cannabis,
for
so they might be illegally arrested, so. Lynn Mazza, will you pass it down that way, Jim? Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Lynn Mazza. I work for the Vermont Center for Independent Living, which is a disability rights and advocacy organization. And one thing that I haven't seen come into the conversation much, and it kind of dovetails with Jim's question, is about the federal regulations, because right now the folks who I work with who are in nursing homes, rehab facilities, or on hospice have no way of accessing medical marijuana or recreational marijuana for that case. Even though it's a medicine that their doctor may think is good for them, they know it works for them, they're on hospice. There's a lot of hesitation in this building, for example, or in any of the other rehab facilities to administer that marijuana, because the doctors and the nurses don't really know what legal ramifications they might have. There's no real good prescribing system. A lot of these facilities also receive federal money, and they're concerned that their funding might be pulled if they're administering. So what that ends up with is a population of people who are really appropriate to be using marijuana who simply can't access it. And I'm wondering, or I'm hoping that that becomes part of the discussion and part of the problem solving that happens.
I can add that we did have some testimony last week, both in Rutland and in Williston, from some community members who explained the difficulties, and they were not disabled or in hospice or in nursing home care, but the difficulties they were encountering in navigating the medical marijuana system and the hurdles, and how frustrated they were, in part by the cost. One woman who was on federal disability benefits says that she can get prescriptions filled with using those disability benefits for opioids for pain, but not for cannabis. And I don't know if there's anything that the Vermont legislature can do in the near term about that sort of thing without changing federal law. Thank you, Lynn. Kathleen James?
I'm just here to listen. Thanks.
Okay.
Kathleen.
I have a quick question.
Brad Meyerson is next.
I yield the floor to
Thank you.
Representative Carroll.
And I've just got turning it over in my mind with respect to the risk that state employees may have if they're selling pot. And I wonder if putting the pot in vending machines would remove the risk to employees.
The devil's in the details, I don't know.
Yeah, someone has to fill those machines.
Age requirements.
Go ahead.
My name is Bradley Meyerson. I live in Manchester. I have been a practicing attorney for over 35 years. A lot of my practice involves impaired driving defense, and I would like to speak specifically to the Department of Public Safety component of the proposed budget. It's at page 18 of the draft report. The request is for between $4.44 and $4.84 million. And I think in many respects, this is absolutely unnecessary and bloated.
Follow the money.
A lot of the money being requested, generally speaking, is for state police anti-drug efforts which are being funded through the federal government and by state government. First, I want to talk about the request of between $290,000 and $393,000 for startup alone of oral fluid testing, also known as roadside testing. I served on a legislative study committee which focused on saliva testing. This is a non-existent program. Saliva testing was voted down 4-1 by the Senate Judiciary Committee, and Senator Sears is chair of that committee. I thank you again for your leadership and your courage on this. Saliva testing is not an appropriate mechanism for testing impaired drivers. We do not have a cutoff level of marijuana impairment in Vermont for drivers the way we do with alcohol, which is 0.08%. This is something that Senator Sears himself has pointed out in discussions about the bill. So why should purchasers of marijuana have to fund between $393,000 for startup of oral fluid testing when it's not even legal in Vermont? And they also, the Department of Public Safety also is asking $60,000 a year for that. So that could be a reduction in the overall tax being requested. We're unlikely to see saliva testing in Vermont anytime soon. It simply doesn't work, and it's inappropriate, and hopefully it won't get through the Senate.
It's not scientific.
Right, thank you. Secondly, there is a request for law enforcement as part of the DPS estimated budget. Annual funding for drug recognition evaluators is between $330,000 and $370,000. We currently have 50 drug recognition evaluators in Vermont, and DREs are police officers. They can be with the state police or with local departments who receive special training in how to evaluate drivers who are impaired by marijuana or some other substances. I should say that, in my opinion, 50 DREs in Vermont is plenty. There have been drivers for years. Marijuana has been part of the Vermont culture for years. The experience in states like Washington and Colorado is that once marijuana became legalized, it did not create a flood of impaired drivers. The $300,000 annual cost for the drug recognition evaluation program, and I'm getting my numbers from the letter, which is Appendix 2 to the report. It's from pages 70 through 75. It's DPS Commissioner Anderson's letter. He says that, actually, let me back up a little bit. We do not need any additional funding for drug recognition evaluators in Vermont through raising taxes on marijuana. The drug recognition evaluation program is funded through the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and which is administered, it's funded through that and administered through the governor's highway safety program. This program is so flush with federal money that in 2017, the Department of Public Safety ran over $40,000 worth of anti-drug driving ads on Boston Red Sox radio broadcasts. And that cost was supplied to me by Commissioner Anderson. In Commissioner Anderson's letter at page 2, which is actually page 71 of the report, it's attached as an appendix, he admits that National Highway Traffic Safety Administration funding is relatively stable. So then why must the marijuana, any tax on marijuana, which ideally should be as low as possible in order to avoid the black market, be used to fund drug recognition evaluators?
I'm wondering if we can go to the other people who signed up to testify. You've gone about 6 minutes. I know you have more to say. We'll probably get back to you.
Thank you.
That would take us to Nancy.
I'm happy to talk to you about
Yeah.
that too.
Nancy Diaferio. That's close. Good evening.
Good evening. I live in Manchester. I used to own a business in Manchester for over 25 years, and I'm familiar with Vermont. To add to what Brad is saying, one of the news stories, the governor was saying how he's not really sure that the time is right, and he's really concerned about road safety. But, you know, they could drive to Massachusetts if they really need to get their cannabis. I looked at the radio like, what are you saying? You're against people driving impaired, but it's okay if they drive to Massachusetts. Does he have any thought that anybody might be impaired on the way there or on the way back, or any impairment ever in that situation? He's being absolutely ridiculous when he makes statements like that. The other thing I want to say is all boats must rise. I keep hearing, you know, how everybody is afraid that they're going to take the easy way out and just turn it over to a few big businesses and not allow the people of this state that have stood behind everyone and have raised people to this where we are now. We need jobs. We need people like myself. I don't own a business anymore. I'm currently on disability. I don't want to stay on disability. I want to become a craft producer of fine bud that people will come to me because I'm growing quality cannabis, organic cannabis. Just like people that are making beer and selling it, and we're, you know, entertaining a great craft beer venue. Why can't we do that with Vermont? That's where I want to be. I'm 59 years old. When I go and apply for work, nobody calls me back. Ever. Why? Many reasons. Because I have a big mouth. I come from New York. I smoke weed. And I owned a business that I did my own thing, and people don't want that. They don't want me to tell them what to do. And so I have to blaze my own trail again, and I'm marching to the beat of my drum, and I don't want to leave Vermont. Don't make me leave this state. I've been here for over 25 years. Where am I going? Where are we all going, honestly? Thank you.
I don't have any public comments. Thank you. Ann did a great job.
Mary Ann Sarvis.
Mary Jane.
Sorry.
From
Mary Jane.
No joke. I came this way. I don't really have any public comments other than I want to know if people like, I'm sorry, I didn't get your, I'm terrible with names, Dailies.
Right.
I live up that road. So I understand the safety things. Do people in your world understand that there is no established way? I'm a medical marijuana patient. I use a lot of THC every night because I have a ton of pain and issues, but I'm perfectly straight.
Cognizant.
Cognizant. Coffee, morning, fine. but it allows me to sleep, and most of all, which is huge, it allows me to stay off opioids and real nasty drugs, which I had been put on, and it's amazing I'm alive, okay? So the problem and the issue is you're gonna test somebody, if somebody like me gets tested, I'm gonna go through the ceiling, and I'm gonna be perfectly straight. So there's no tests for this. So as much as I understand how you have to have safety in your environment, and believe me, you guys go by me all the time, I'm like you, very aware. That's not possible as yet from what I understand in the science. And the other thing I just want to say, and I say this every time I come, my daughter goes to college, is about to finally graduate in Colorado. So I got to go out there at the beginning of Tax and Regulate. I got to see it. I got to talk to college kids. All the college kids told me, whatever you do, don't smoke in the car. Don't, just make sure it's not in the car. And I was so impressed with how everybody warned me, this is how we do it here and whatnot. I was impressed with the safety of the stores and how it worked. I was mostly impressed with the college students and how smart and together they were about it. But I'm really impressed by the money. They built a $28 million arts complex at Western Colorado State, mostly from their Tax and Regulate, which was not at 60, I realize it's a much bigger state, at 26%. So my thought is if the 26% or some ridiculous rate is here in southern Vermont, you're gonna hear this giant sucking sound of all those funds going right down to Massachusetts that we need in this state. So why not make our state raise money for our educational system? The first thing they did in Colorado was bring school lunches to kids. Education is a huge issue. So are young people like my daughter not willing to live in this state because there's no jobs. So let's keep our young people here. Let's put the money into health and education, and let's not make people like me scared to drive because I might test high. Okay.
No, some may oppose this, but tax rate needs to be competitive with what the gray market or black market is selling the drug.
Yeah, and that's
You can't try to, and this is part of the medical marijuana problem, is we have a high cost of medical marijuana. So it makes, that's difficult. I want to just, in defense of Brian, under the CDL license, it's zero alcohol, zero any drug.
It's black or white.
Huh?
Black or white, you can test for presence, you don't have to test for toxicity.
Well, there's a zero tolerance for CDL license, and for good reason. They are, I do see those trucks.
Price that people seem to be comfortable with as residents is between $200 for an ounce of what you can consider the lowest quality sellable product to really good, which would be just a hair under 300. Anywhere over that and people really start griping and looking towards cutting corners and possibly things that are not good, and that's the comfortable range. It's between 2 and 3, and if the state were to set up a system to evaluate quality.
We may ask you to testify if you'd like.
I might be able to ask to testify regardless.
Next on our list is Seth Loomis.
I'm here. We're here to listen and
Okay.
we can answer questions.
And is that Stuart? You're Stuart?
No, I'm Stuart.
Oh, you're okay. Yes, sir. Would you like to?
Yes, sir. Stuart Sable.
Stuart Sable, take the mic.
Stuart Sable from Brattleboro. I'd like to thank the commission for doing this and think in general, the report's pretty good. It focuses on artisanal grows, but how it gets there, and the devil's in the details, and we're not dealing with the details here, is an issue. The fact that there's small, relatively small sites of 500 square feet works, and the fees work, but they can't have, what we do with businesses starting up here is ridiculous. To make that work, you have to deal with innumerable agencies, monitoring which is geared towards larger grows, you know, video feedback to state police and things like that, you know. And, you know, any startup business is at risk in Vermont, anywhere, actually. And we have a chance here to do something and make it easy to start up a business. Put it all under one roof or one commissioner, so that all the applications can be done in one place. So you're not applying to the Department of Agriculture for one thing, for the Department of Public Safety for another. You know, we're starting up something new. Let's make it easy for businesses to start. Instead of having to travel all over the state, fill out numerous applications, and you drive the cost up so artisanal people can't afford it. You know, all these things cost, and they cost before you make a dime. So it's not going to help people locally that traditionally do it. We have to make it easy. The other thing I have to say with regard to the tax, I think it is too high, but I think we have to get away from earmarking taxes. It should go to the general fund, changing climate, changing finances. You know, we don't know what things are going to be like in a number of years. You know, why earmark it? Let our legislatures year to year put it where they think it should go. You know, I think all these things should go in the general fund. We need flexibility. You know, we don't need to say, well, the state police need this, the Department of Agriculture needs that. They do that anyway with the legislature. You know, let's put it in the general fund, and then they can come and say, we need more GREs. Fine, but let's not earmark it. And I think that also hinders the process, because everybody wants to get their foot in the door on one bill.
You're right. That's a very good point. I
Thank
have to agree with Stuart.
Thank you. Amos Newton?
Good evening, and thanks guys for coming down. I don't have a lot to say, but I just think it's important that, once again, the small growers are able to get their foot in the door, and it doesn't, you know, taxes the various permits are not prohibited, so that it doesn't end up being a corporate thing. Thanks.
I think the last person who was on the sign-up sheet who hasn't spoken, Frank Nelson.
Excuse me, can I sign up? I gave him a,
Yeah.
take my
I was at the Rutland meeting as well. We got a few minutes to talk about. California, they did a very stringent testing under Prop 65 of any toxin. It's a directive from the people of California. It's very, very precise. It's done by scientists as opposed by politicians, potentially some other agency in the U.S. government. I don't know what to do there. But they did come up with a Prop 65 declaration that marijuana smoke was a carcinogen, and they listed formaldehyde in smoke and 33 other carcinogens. You can go online and check that out. There's plenty of information on it. All smoke contains methyl alcohol, and that's really one thing I've been focused on. Methyl alcohol comes in a can or jar by itself with skull and crossbones on it, has since 1904.
Can you hold the microphone closer to your mouth? I can't hear you.
Thank you. Has since 1904. Again, this is the smoke. Your creosote and chimney all smoke. Creosote and chimney is methyl alcohol and carbon. That's why it burns so fast. So there's evidence from California that there is carcinogens in marijuana smoke. There was a research paper here that I gave to the group in Rutland on the role of P53 in marijuana smoke condensates induced genotoxicity in ATOS. Excuse my voice here. And it says here that that there's a genetic effect in apoptosis in lung cancer cells exposed to marijuana smoke, MCSs. And the result of the study was MCSs significantly increased DNA breakages, which is what you're talking about when you're talking about cancer. You're talking about an epigenetic change to where you don't have a repair enzyme that's working properly, and so you have cancer develop. So increased DNA breakages and chromosomal damages in P53, and it goes on and lists some cells. If anybody's familiar with genetics, I suggest going to learn about method alcoholic, go to wildscienceleaps.com, like waiting for wildscienceleaps.com. He's going to get a Nobel Prize for his research at some point. But epigenetic transgenerational inheritance, where something passes from generation to generation. So some of these changes may not show up in the immediate generation, but you will see it following up in the following generations. It occurs where it affects the sperm bag, transmits epigenetic information between the generations. The phenomenon has been documented by many labs in a number of different species over the past decade. More recently, a number of studies have indicated that environmental stress can promote epigenetic alterations that are transmittable and induce pathologies in subsequent generations. What they're talking about with environmental stress is environmental causes. This can be a whole host of things that can actually cause a person's genome to change dynamically through life, and that gets passed on. So this was missing this type of look, and as an example, just some fungicides and stuff that they were studying. 3 generations after exposure to fungicides, they saw abnormalities in the testes, ovaries, kidneys, prostate, mammillary glands, and brain. In a one where it was DNA methylation, which is done by a methyl group and a acetyl group, which formaldehyde is a member of. This is what locks and unlocks and causes changes to the DNA code. In one example, a plant flowering trait, because this doesn't just happen in mammals, was later found to be a change, was found to be DNA methylation that occurred and has been maintained for 100 generations. In worms, traits altered by changes in nutrition have been shown to be propagated over 50 generations. In mammals with longer generation times, we have found toxicant-induced abnormality traits that propagated for nearly 10 generations. So sometimes we're talking about the present, but we need to examine the future and future generations, and what may not show up presently may pop up in following generations, such as a higher propensity for cancers. For example, one study here shows air pollution causing epigenetic change triggering asthma, and they're finding to be some of the asthma showing up may not have been actually the kid's exposure, but is actually due to a parental exposure to something which altered the DNA code, which got passed on to the kid, which led to the process, to the pathology of the asthma diagnosis.
Do you recommend eating it, tinctures, or abandoning smoking altogether?
The methanol problem.
Frank, if you could take 30 seconds to wrap up.
30 seconds, thank you.
Thank you.
One of the things is avoiding the smoking, yes, okay, maybe even for cigarette smoking, because tobacco contains the same things. This will reflect in healthcare costs of groups that are participating in the smoking. Non-smokers will have to pay for it. It's a level premium payment for a health insurance program. There's no surcharge for those that are smoking marijuana or smoking tobacco or anything like this, so that they are not paying their fair share of their health care costs, which means increased cancer rates, that everybody else is bearing that cost. That should be figured out, because nobody likes the health premiums now.
Hey, this is supposed to be a debate. It's supposed to be a debate.
Hang on a second. If we
One little thing on
Yeah,
the
bye.
traffic thing is that today they're all Merrill. I'll read this quote. Police have charged 34-year-old Keith Cushman of Lebanon, New Hampshire with grossly careless and negligent operation with death resulting in September 3rd accident in Norwich. They said toxology results confirmed cannabis was in the blood. Now, everybody here wants to see this done right. So everyone here, I think, should.
What else was in the blood? Alcohol? Opiates?
Next up is Brian Marshall from Guilford.
Hi, I'm Brian Marshall from Guilford.
Get it right up to your
I'm ready to speak. That's right. Sounds very strange to me. I can't hear. I want to hear. So, excuse me. One point needs to be brought up. One point that needs to be brought up is there's a lot of looking at this stuff like we live in a bubble. You know, it's like looking at it as a commodity, like to be taxed, right? But it's like, I said, just like to get the worth of the product, right? We're in this bubble where you want to get the maximum amount of dollars you can for the state, and we want to produce while have the whole world around us, and there's a global market getting ready, and people have this perception here of this infantile state market, you know, and where we don't even exist on any level, like in any meaningful way, as far as representing the marijuana market. Whether, you know, right now we're still black market coming into a legal market, but we don't exist. An image of us exists. There's people in the closet. There's people doing small things, but what it takes to like why marijuana is worth what it is. It's like if you're building a football team. You don't just take a couple random babies, throw them in there, train them how to play football. It's like you have to go through thousands of plants, say if you're talking about plants, to get to the level to find that MVP plant that even is worthy to compete in the market and is worth the tax dollars you want. And when we take this approach that cannabis is so like needs to be heavily regulated because it's this dangerous or controversial subject, and we're like, okay, we're going to move forward. We're nervous. We're going to let you grow you can flower 2 plants. On that level, flowering 2 plants. So then, just pick say California. You put Vermont up against California. The level of selections happening there, the level of genetics that exist there. You want Vermont flooded. It's like we're just to hold us back with the perceptions that people are going into it. We won't exist. We don't exist. You know, it's like our gray market is the biggest asset to the state on every level, because what's happening right now is every dollar, like we're bankrupt. Every marijuana dollar is going out west. And we're like you should take them to court. You know what I mean? Because we're poor and we're losing all our money, and to be able to get that money back, first you have to stop it from leaving. It's like your fear with people home growing is that, oh, well, for them to grow, they'll grow too much. Then they can sell a little bit, and they'll make money. But that would be the best thing you would want to happen, you know, because every home grower and the whole gray market here is like that last it's like the last net that's catching dollars from leaving our part of our state and our part of the country. And so it's just like the whole concept, you don't own any of those tax dollars because none of us earned the money and the market share. And you have to let us do it. And if you don't, it's like, so when you're handing out licenses, you don't want to limit the amount that get handed out. 100 licenses means I'm not even considering a legal market because there's no way I'm going to be one of those lucky people. I don't have enough money. You want to make it so that every fool could take a go at it, because only a few of us are gonna make it, but we're gonna spend our money at the print shop, at all these different levels of starting a business that's never gonna make it. But I'm gonna spend every dollar and do everything I can to give it a try. So let everyone give it a try. And then you don't end up with the people that were able to pull it off on paper and have enough money, but did that put every good grower in the system? And did that get every grower out of the gray market that you could possibly pull out of the gray market and put them in the legal market? And then once you do that, don't go attacking the gray market or someone that has their 2 plants, but I grow it so it's from me to the table there. And then I'm, well, not me, I'm very limited. But, this individual, so what if they're selling it to the neighborhood? Because if they're not selling it to their neighborhood, then the West Coast or imported herb is being sold to the neighborhood and money's leaving our area. And I guess that's where I'll drop it.
So I think we've covered everyone who wanted to testify. Brad, you had a few more things you wanted to cover.
As long as everyone who has spoken wants to speak. Thank you. Just to finish the point regarding the DRE funding. There is more than enough money for DRE funding. It does not have to be DREs, drug recognition evaluators, do not need to be funded through marijuana taxation. The money's coming from the federal government. It's enough. Lastly, Commissioner Anderson, Department of Public Safety Commissioner Anderson's letter as a basis for requesting the funds for public safety, which is $2.2 million in year 1, $4.8 million in year 3. This is strictly for law enforcement. It is simply ridiculous and inflated. He addresses in his letter, which is part of the record here, that alcohol and marijuana are gateway drugs, and that there will be a flood of additional drug importation and use in Vermont when we go to this type of a tax and regulated system. However, this is a 1970s type of thinking, but it is not a modern way of thinking. There are studies that show that increased use of marijuana or use of marijuana in states that have legalized it have actually decreased opioid use, and that there has not been a huge exponential increase in marijuana use in states that have legalized it, such that it would justify the rate of increase in law enforcement funding that is being sought by the Department of Public Safety in the proposed budget here. And using money from taxing marijuana for drug enforcement generally is an inappropriate use of marijuana taxation dollars. The Department of Public Safety gets plenty of money, not only from the legislature, but from the federal government. Senator Leahy and others have been very good about providing lots of money for drug enforcement in this state. The Department of Public Safety has plenty of money for drug enforcement. Yet, even with all that money, drugs are as cheap, unfortunately, as cheap and as plentiful as before. So, raising tax dollars through marijuana taxation to fight drug use in Vermont, drug importation, is, in my view, an inappropriate and wasteful use of money that could be spent in other areas with greater public benefit from a marijuana tax. And I just want to finish by saying, somebody mentioned, I don't remember who it was, that don't earmark. Let the legislature decide how to use tax revenues from taxing marijuana. And I think that's a good idea.
The legislature is certainly going to make that decision, because that's where it gets made. And keep in mind that some of the contents of these draft reports, and that one in particular, are responding to specific instructions in the governor's executive order to respond on certain issues for costs and stuff. That'll all go through the legislative process and come out the other end, and there'll be a compromise. And there'll be a test, right?
I just want to respond to the drug recognition expert issue. Brad, your analysis may be correct that 50 is enough. I don't know, 50, 75, I don't know what's enough. What I do know is they need to be geographically located. And I've talked to police down here who have had to send somebody from the barracks in Brattleboro to meet somebody in Wilmington who's being brought over from Bennington to be evaluated. That just doesn't make sense from both police point of view as well as whoever the suspect is. So I think there needs to be some recognition of geographic. And that's one of the things that I would like to see as we talk about that. And that's why, for me, that was really the compromise. I'm adamantly against the roadside testing. If they want to do it, they can get a warrant. But to do the drug recognition expert, I don't know what the number is, but we've got to be geographically located here.
My understanding is, and this illustrates the point of how many DREs there are in Vermont, West Dover, the little town of West Dover has a DRE.
Yeah.
So, it shows how many we really have. I agree with you with regard to geographical distribution, but that should not equate to the need for more DREs.
I'm just defending them.
Thank you.
A little bit on that.
Anyone else who said they didn't want to speak, change their mind?
Or curtail their comments to keep them short?
Well, we have a little more time to spend. I'll give you two guys each 2 minutes more. I'm still clicking up the clock to see whether I can get it.
I won't need this. There's evidence that the use of cannabis for healthcare is there, and there's probably going to be more as time goes along, especially some of the extracts that are still being tested for various diseases. Stuff is popping up really in the news fairly frequently. What's missing, though, is in a lot of cases, with the safety issues, is large clinical trial data sets in the United States.
Frank, it might be helpful for us to know, you haven't actually said, I think we know, do you support going for retail sales or not?
I support a model where if there's a retail sale process using a safe extract or edible or something that's safe, so you're not making people sicker over the long term or transgenerating, affecting future generations, then it's probably, if it's safe, why not? But if the user, like a driver's license, where you get the permit to operate to use, okay, they could show that they have a permit to use, and an opt-in or a mandatory participation would assist, go along with the permit of a where they would be entered into a clinical trial. For example, some people who are taking cannabis for pain and things like this, their doctors may give it to them. Their data may not actually be released because they're not participants in a clinical trial, which would build a larger data set supporting pros or supporting cons as the data set grew larger. And that would be my point, is that the state is, given the size of the state, the number of users, would be to some advantage to be able to develop this type of data set, which doesn't exist, I don't think, anywhere in the country. Do you know if it exists?
It's illegal to do any research on cannabis because it's Schedule 1, so most of our research is done by Israel. Thank you very much.
That's right. So this Vermont could step forward and actually start a clinical trial model through the permitting process, but they would actually, could be opt-in, may not be opt-in, depending on what the legislature would want.
We have a couple more pithy remarks.
No, I'm trying to video myself, it's not working. All right, that's good. Anyhow, I think the biggest issue is one of quality. Many of the side effects that people talk about when they experience cannabis for the first time or at a party is probably due to the poor quality and the poor growing techniques and the fertilizers and the pesticides. The neem oil makes people paranoid, gets rid of bugs. So a lot of the research that you would like to take 10 or 20 years to do longitudinal studies has already been done. I'm a 51-year longitudinal study. My dad died here in his 100th year. I expect I might exceed that because of the curative and health qualities of cannabis. I don't know what to say. I would prefer that it was so available that I wouldn't have to take it a little puff at a time. I would just like to eat it the way our ancestors did because their animals ate hemp seed and they ate the animals and their cannabinoid systems were fed. We don't know what cannabis will cure because nobody will allow us to check it out. But we have plenty of anecdotal evidence that it'll cure a whole host of diseases and illnesses. The only thing it won't cure is making people wealthy through their dividend checks. Hopefully, Big Canna is not the model we're going with. I'd like to see, Roosevelt said he wanted to put a chicken in every pot. I'd like to see us put pot in every kitchen. It is a health food. It is a substance that we can use for great advantage if we just remove the stigma. And we will also restore a little bit of dignity to our law enforcement and to our criminal justice system if we stop victimizing people who are just trying to get healthy and get through the day and not get depressed and not get suicidal and not get homicidal and not beat up their wife or their husband or their kids. I just think that we're going to get so much further ahead if we can use Vermont, which has the population the size of the city of Detroit, as an example of what we can do right so that we can put legislation out there that other states can copy. All you need to do is give the people who are growing credit for their grow and make sure that their grow is good enough by testing it before you put it into our regulated and tax system. Thank you.
Thank you all for your attendance and patience and interest. As to recap, since not everyone was here when I did my opening remarks, we have another listening session tomorrow night in White River Junction. The full commission is meeting next Wednesday afternoon at the State House in Montpelier, and our schedule is to get this a final report out by the 15th, which is a week from Saturday. That might roll over until the following Monday. And then this will be delivered to the governor, it'll be published, and we have been working, we've agreed to work in collaboration with Senator Sears and other legislators to see if a bill can be put together that gets broad-based support. And I think we're all committed to that. Without knowing what the details are yet, you never know how that's going to work out. You have anything?
No, I mean, we're certainly not going to reinvent the wheel, and I think that the commission has done it. And I appreciate comments made tonight about the commission report and the tax rate and so forth. But we're not going to reinvent the wheel. I think there's a number of things in the commission report that could be added to the basic S-241 that the Senate passed 5 times, I think, last count. And so that's our goals for you and the commission. We appreciate the work that you all have done. Tom and Jake and other members of the commission who came down here tonight. I want to thank you all very much for coming out and speaking, but I'm really pleased that you are willing to come this far south to hear from this end of the state. Thank you.
Safe travels and stay tuned.
Thank you.